A father drives to a boy's house looking for his son's car keys. The boy tells him he doesn't know where they are. Then someone else in the room says she saw them the day before. A few minutes later, the keys turn up. For Elmore Wansley, that's the moment. Not the search boats, not the headlines. That small, ordinary lie about a set of keys is what he says broke his trust completely. Somewhere on a remote Mississippi island, an 18-year-old named Nolan Wells spent his last known hours surrounded by friends, on a boat, in the water, celebrating a holiday like thousands of other people that same afternoon. Hours later, those friends came home. He didn't. And in the 2 weeks since, his family has been trying to answer one question investigators still can't. What actually happened to him in between? Before we go further, a note. This case remains under active investigation. No cause of death has been officially determined, no arrests have been made, and investigators say they have found no evidence so far that a crime occurred. Everything you're about to hear comes directly from official statements, verified news reporting, and public records. Where something is still unconfirmed, we'll tell you plainly, because Nolan Wells deserves a story told with the same care his family says they're still waiting for from investigators. This is a developing case, and this video reflects everything confirmed as of today. 2 autopsies, one state, one independent, are still pending, and when either one is released, we'll be covering it here. If you want that update the moment it drops, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notification bell. To understand why a missing set of keys matters this much, you have to understand who Nolan Wells was before any of this happened, and what his mother says she felt the very last time she hugged him. Christine Wansley remembers the evening of July 3rd in detail most parents wouldn't think to hold on to until they need to. Her son cooked dinner for her and her husband that night, baking salmon in their kitchen, the night before he left for his Independence Day weekend. She says he told her he loved her. A hug, a kiss, and then he was gone. She didn't know it would be the last ordinary moment she'd ever share with him. Nolan Xavier Wells grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a coastal community of roughly 19,000 people. He graduated from Ocean Springs High School, where he played multiple sports and built a reputation as a wide receiver with real talent. His high school coach, Jake Bramlett, later said Wells was exactly the kind of son, teammate, friend, and student every program hopes to have. Another coach who worked with him, Tracy Lampley, remembered him as a happy-go-lucky kid with a big smile that everybody adored. After graduating, he enrolled at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he kept playing wide receiver and was preparing to return for the coming season. He would have turned 19 the following month. He never got the chance. His mother has described him over and over in almost the same words every time a camera has been in front of her. The kindest soul, someone who loved everyone, someone who never met a stranger. Those aren't words written for an obituary. They're words a grieving mother keeps repeating because she needs people to understand who her son was before they hear anything else about how he died. That's the young man who, on the afternoon of July 4th, climbed into a boat with 3 friends and headed out toward a barrier island most people outside Mississippi had never heard of. Horn Island sits roughly 10 miles offshore, nearly 14 miles long, but barely a mile wide at its widest point. No roads reach it, no bridges, no cell towers with reliable coverage. The National Park Service, which manages the island as part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, describes it plainly on its own website. No staff, no drinking water, no shelter, no communication. The only way in or out is by boat, and once you're there, you're genuinely on your own. That isolation is exactly what draws people there on holidays. Brian Trasher, a volunteer with the United Cajun Navy who later took part in the search for Wells, has described the island's northwestern tip as especially popular, prized for its calm water and open sand. He's also described how deceptive that calm can be. In some spots, he said, you can go from standing in 3 feet of water to 20 feet within a few steps, the sandbar dropping away without warning. That was the beach where Nolan Wells spent his final confirmed hours. According to Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter, Wells traveled with his friends from a private dock near Ocean Springs and spent the day on the island's northwest tip. He was last seen there around 3 in the afternoon, wearing blue swim trunks and sunglasses. Sometime after that, his friends got back in the boat and returned to the mainland. Nolan didn't go with them.
Sheriff Ledbetter has said that based on conversations with the people who were there, it seemed Wells chose to stay behind, expecting to catch a ride back later with someone else. One detail that's since surfaced adds some human context to that decision. Josh Gill, commander of the United Cajun Navy, has said his understanding was that Wells wanted to stay and keep talking with a young woman he'd met on the island that day. An ordinary, almost sweet reason for a teenager to linger a little longer on a beach. It's the kind of decision thousands of 18-year-olds make every summer without a second thought. Except this time, no one came back for him. Christine Wansley reported her son missing at midnight once it became unmistakably clear he wasn't coming home. Try to sit with that timeline for a second. A mother spending the evening of a national holiday watching the clock, then a phone, then the door, before finally accepting that something was wrong enough to call it in. What followed was a search effort that pulled in more resources than most missing person cases ever require. The National Park Service, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the United States Coast Guard, local sheriff's deputies, volunteer teams, including the United Cajun Navy, combed miles of open water and shoreline around an island with no roads, no infrastructure, and no easy way to search it quickly. For 2 days, nothing. Then, on Monday, a National Park Service ranger found a body at the northwestern tip of Horn Island, the same stretch of beach where Nolan had last been seen alive, laughing, wearing blue swim trunks, deciding to stay a little longer. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed to reporters that dental records identified the body as Nolan Wells. An autopsy was performed the next day by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office. As of this recording, those results still haven't been released publicly. Investigators say they're waiting on toxicology before any official cause of death can be determined. Sheriff Ledbetter has said investigators suspect Wells drowned and has said there's currently no evidence a crime occurred. But he's also said the investigation remains active and his department has made a specific, pointed request to the public. Come forward if you witnessed or heard any argument, disturbance, or unusual activity on Horn Island that day, and share any original, unedited photos or video from the island's northwest tip. That request is worth sitting with. It tells you investigators believe there's more to learn here than a simple accident narrative accounts for. And for Nolan's parents, that gap between "we suspect drowning" and "we're still investigating" has become almost unbearable to live inside. Because in the days after their son's body was found, Christine and Elmer Wansley started noticing things that didn't sit right with them. Small things, the kind of details that on their own might mean nothing, but together started to feel like a pattern they couldn't ignore. The first was the keys.
Wells's family says his phone and his car keys ended up in the possession of one of the friends who came back from the island without him. Elmore has described going to that young man's home to retrieve them, being told at first that they couldn't be found until someone else in the room said she'd seen them the day before. The keys appeared shortly after that. Elmore has said plainly that the moment he realized he'd been lied to was the moment he stopped trusting anything else he was told about that day. The phone raised its own question. The family says they located it themselves using a location tracking app rather than being told where it was. Ben Crump, the attorney the family later hired, has asked the question that's been echoing through this case ever since. What teenager leaves his phone if he actually plans to spend the night on a remote island? Then there's Nolan's Snapchat. His family says he posted there constantly, the way most teenagers do, but they say his account went silent for roughly 24 hours after he was last seen, and that a location tied to the account didn't match where his phone eventually turned up. None of this has been independently confirmed by investigators in a public statement, but it's part of why his parents stopped believing the simplest explanation and started demanding a harder one. And then there's the video. Investigators have said publicly that they're trying to identify the original source of a clip that had already been circulating online before anyone connected it to Nolan's case, a clip that includes the sound of an argument in the background. Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton later described it as appearing to show a group on the beach with what looked like a disagreement breaking out among a few people within it. We want to pause here and be exact, because this is the point where a real investigation can tip over into something else entirely. That video has not been authenticated by investigators as showing Nolan or the events surrounding his death. Its timing and origin are still being verified. Unverified clips from this exact case have already led to innocent people being wrongly identified online, real people dragged into a tragedy they had nothing to do with. We're not going to add to that by guessing at what the video shows. What we can tell you is that its existence and the questions around it remain part of what investigators say they're still working to confirm. There's one more thread, and it may be the most consequential. Crump has said a young woman who was on the island that day told investigators Wells was already heading back toward the boat when his friends left. But Crump says his friends have given a different account, saying he chose to stay behind specifically to keep talking with her. Two versions of the same few minutes. Crump's read on it is simple and direct. One of those accounts is accurate, the other isn't. Investigators, he says, need to determine which. By July 8th, the Wansleys had had enough of waiting quietly. They retained Ben Crump, along with senior attorney Liza Park, to run an independent review alongside the official investigation. Crump made his intentions public immediately. The family would not rest, he said, until every fact about what happened on Horn Island came into the light, and he called on Mississippi investigators to pursue the case with real urgency. 2 days after that, Christine and Elmer Wansley did something most grieving parents never have to consider. They boarded a flight to New York and on July 10th stood at a podium in Harlem alongside Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton in front of national cameras because they'd decided their son's story couldn't stay contained to local Mississippi news. It was there that the case's racial dimension became part of the public conversation directly. Crump and Sharpton both noted that the three friends who were with Wells that day are white, and Wells was black. Sharpton told reporters the explanations given to the family so far simply didn't add up, and said the case deserved the same thorough, unflinching investigation any family would expect, regardless of who was involved. We need to be precise here, because precision is exactly what this moment in the story demands. Crump and Sharpton have not accused any specific person of a crime. No one has been charged with anything. What they've done, publicly and repeatedly, is ask that the questions around the phone, the keys, the video, and the conflicting accounts be answered in the open, instead of settled quietly behind closed doors. Sheriff Ledbetter's office hasn't wavered from its own position through any of this. The investigation remains active. No cause of death has been determined. Investigators still say they suspect drowning and still say they've found no evidence of a crime. That hasn't changed, even as the pressure on his department has grown louder by the week. On a separate track entirely, the family's own investigation has kept moving. Crump confirmed an independent autopsy was performed this week by a coroner in Washington, D.C. He said the results were expected the same day as the Harlem press conference, but were delayed when the medical examiner's flights were canceled. As of this recording, neither the independent results nor the state's official autopsy findings have been made public. Two families of experts, two separate systems, both still waiting on the same basic answer. Crump also revealed in a Good Morning America interview that same morning that the independent autopsy had financial support from Colin Kaepernick, the civil rights activist and former NFL quarterback. Separately, he said actor and director Tyler Perry is helping cover the cost of Nolan's funeral. Neither man has spoken publicly about it beyond what Crump described, but their quiet involvement says something about how far this story has already traveled beyond one Mississippi family. So has the public response. A GoFundMe set up to support the Wansleys had raised more than $220,000 by the day of the Harlem press conference from strangers who never met Nolan Wells but felt compelled to do something anyway. Liza Park closed out part of that press conference with a plea aimed directly at anyone who was on Horn Island that day. "You don't need to know exactly what your information means," she said. "If you saw something, say something." It's nearly the same request the sheriff's office has been making since the case's first week, a rare point of agreement between a family that no longer trusts local investigators and the department they no longer trust. Crump says his team currently holds Wells' phone as part of their independent review and plans to hand it over to Mississippi investigators once that review is finished. He's also said his team hasn't yet spoken directly with the three friends who were with Wells that day, though those young men now have attorneys of their own and outreach is planned. Standing in Harlem that day, far from the water where her son spent his final afternoon, Christine Wansley said something that cut through every legal detail surrounding this case. This isn't how she wanted the world to meet her son. Here is everything that remains confirmed today. Nolan Wells was last seen alive around 3 in the afternoon on July 4th on the northwestern tip of Horn Island. His friends returned to the mainland without him. His body was recovered 2 days later in the same place he was last seen. Investigators suspect drowning, but have not officially determined a cause of death, and both a state and an independent autopsy remain pending. His family has raised specific, serious questions about a phone, about keys, about a video still being verified, and about 2 witness accounts that can't both be true. And they've done so publicly, backed by national civil rights figures and a spotlight this case didn't have in its earliest days. None of what the family has raised has been confirmed by investigators as evidence of wrongdoing. It remains, for now, a set of unresolved questions attached to a death officials still call undetermined. That distinction isn't a technicality. It protects people who could be wrongly blamed by online speculation, and it protects the truth Nolan Wells' own family says they're still fighting to reach.
Before any of this, before Harlem, before the video nobody can explain yet, before the pending autopsies and the unanswered questions, he was an 18-year-old who baked his parents salmon the night before a holiday, told his mother he loved her, and went to spend the 4th of July on the water with his friends, the same way thousands of other teenagers along that coastline did that same afternoon. That's the Nolan Wells his family wants remembered, even while they keep fighting, as loudly and as publicly as they know how, to find out exactly how that day ended. 2 autopsy reports are still sitting unopened somewhere between Mississippi and Washington, D.C. When either one becomes public, the answer to the question this entire case has been built around, how Nolan Wells actually died, moves from suspected to confirmed. We'll bring you that update the moment it happens. If you have verified information relevant to this case, report it directly to Jackson County Sheriff's Office.